You're listening to That Vegan Couples podcast with Natasha and Luca.
Episode number 64, The Vegan Label and No Longer Vegan, plus vegan psychologist Clare Mann.
Welcome to That Vegan Couples podcast. 2 people, 1 mic, endless possibilities. And now your hosts, Natasha and Luca.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show and thanks so much for joining us.
References for this episode will be included in the notes for this post.
Don't forget you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.
And make sure you check out our website, thatvegancouple.com.
That's where you'll find our ebooks, our online store for all your vegan merch, and if you sign up to our website for free, we'll send you a heap of gifts.
We will, including an exclusive discount on our health and lifestyle guide ebook, which also includes our recipes ebook.
Today's episode is a little different to what we usually do on the show. We've been inundated with requests to respond to many people on social media who have posted videos saying they're no longer vegan or no longer want to be called vegan.
Late last year, we responded to YouTubers and social media influencers Kalal, Megan Moon and Evan Rock, and Tim Shieff, who all went back to eating animal products. And most recently, we've made 2 response videos to Bonnie Rebecca's announcement that she's no longer vegan. And then came Stella Raye's video revealing that she has been eating animal products for the last year. And then John Venus's video saying he no longer wants to be labelled as a vegan.
Part of us wants this to just all go away, and we feel quite emotionally exhausted having to respond to these people and basically say the same thing over and over. But we're also aware that this is part of our job and responsibility to bring balance and reason to the situation and to also help people learn from these situations. And of course, most importantly, to defend the animal victims who are all too often seem to be left out of the equation.
That's right. This response is going to be quite different to what we've done in the past. In this episode, we're going to give you our thoughts on a few things, and then we're going to bring vegan psychologist Clare Mann onto the show to discuss what's happening in the online vegan community more broadly.
All right, let's start with Stella Raye. So we're going to keep this one short and sweet because it's the typical excuses that we've heard from many people. There's nothing new that came out of her video. Basically, she started eating animals about a year ago and has only just come out now to tell people about it. So what's interesting though is that she made a vegan clothes shopping video with PETA, which was released in late January. So she obviously has been, as I said, eating animals for the past year, but she just did a vegan video with PETA. So I don't know what was happening there in her mind, I guess, morally, where she stood with it all. And I don't know if PETA knew about the fact that she was now eating animals.
It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the comments under PETA's video were like, she's not vegan. So I don't know. Anyhow, what we kind of felt was that when Kalal put her video out, that was late last year, right? About in November, I think, ish.
Maybe a little bit before.
Right. So I felt like she opened the floodgates and created a quote-unquote safe space, if you like. And that was when so many other people started coming out about eating animal products. And I think maybe because she had the largest platform.
Yeah.
And so if Kalal came out and said, I've gone back to eating animals, and that was like, oh, well, she set the bar and she created the safe space.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of like when a high-profile person on, like an influencer goes vegan, and then they inspire a lot of their followers to go vegan. But this is like in reverse.
It's the opposite.
The opposite.
Yeah. And then, of course, Bonnie Rebecca's announcement was like the final green light for others to come out and say, I'm eating animals too. That's how we felt anyway. And interestingly, Stella Raye confirmed this in her video. She said, those people gave me courage to make this video. Now, she didn't say specifically Kalal and Bonnie, but she said people who have already come out and made videos gave her the courage too. So it kind of confirmed what we were thinking.
Yeah,
right?
It plays into that whole human psychology thing. We basically want to go with the herd.
Like if others are doing it, then it's okay for us to do it. And, so one thing we've been kind of talking about is that this is almost like a cleansing process in the community. And I use the word community very loosely here because is it a community online that we have? I don't know what it is.
I think it's a community in the sense that when somebody is new to a vegan lifestyle, for example, and is discovering all of the ins and outs of veganism, you know, one of the very first things they do is get on YouTube and subscribe to a host of vegan channels. And if you were watching me now, I was putting vegan in inverted commas.
Yes. Because some are no longer.
Yeah. So, and I think, and I know this was the case for us, you feel like you're part of an online community at that point. I think perhaps later on you realise, okay, perhaps it's not so much of a community. There's
After all.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So anyhow, we'll use the word community in what are these?
Quotation marks, inverted commas.
We're doing our fingers in the air thing, right? We're just going to use that because I guess that's the easiest way to describe what's happening online. Fine. So basically, back to what I was saying, it's kind of like a cleansing process of this online community where we're kind of seeing through, you know, what's going on and sorting out who's who and what their intentions are and where they're at. So I don't know, it's like a detox. Maybe? Can we call it that? And so as we've been saying, it's really important to follow animal rights activists because none of the people that we're seeing going back to eating animals are activists in terms of the traditional sense. You know, they're not out there on the street at slaughterhouses and protests and outreaching. They're focused on health and fitness and more spiritual things sometimes. So, and that's all great. That's needed as well. But if you really want to have some kind of strong foundation in your vegan community, follow activists.
Yeah, I agree. I'd also like to add there, for example, street activism has been around for decades, but only in recent years has it regained a lot of popularity, mainly due to social media and 3 large animal rights organisations that have a worldwide scope now.
And we're talking about Anonymous for the Voiceless, the Safe Movement, and Direct Action Everywhere.
That's right. And obviously, you know, the rise of veganism and the rise of vegan activism and social media, it all goes hand in hand.
Yes.
But I still think, just like we were not involved in traditional street activism until, 18 months ago or what have you, you can still have an online presence where you discuss animal rights issues.
Absolutely.
So like we did, we used to include slaughterhouse footage, factory farm footage, still photos of slaughterhouses and factory farms. We used to always talk about the ethics in our sit-down videos, wherever we were living. You'd weave it into, a vlog somehow. Yeah. So you don't necessarily have to be involved in those. You don't have to be on the street. You can keep it online because, let's face it, it's a very efficient way to reach the most number of people. But you just have to put that in, make sure it's in there with the smoothie bowls and the fitness stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as you've got a strong ethical focus.
Yeah.
Then
if your audience
great.
never hears that from you and all they ever see is the health and lifestyle and fitness side of things, then it's,
we end up where we are. Yeah. So one thing we've noticed is that how quickly there can be a slippery slope, if you like. And once we start seeing animals as here for us or see them as commodities, something we can use, something we can take from, people very quickly start to see them being used in other ways. And so, for example, as we've seen, a lot of people will start off by eating some eggs and some fish for quote-unquote health, but then it leads to other things. And this is where Bonnie Rebecca comes into the discussion. So we've been sent a lot of messages about her recent Day in My Life and new furniture video. And people, we didn't watch it, but people were saying to us, basically she's bought a new rug and it's made from wool, or at least half of it is made from wool, and part of her couch was stuffed with down, with feathers. So those things obviously have zero to do with health. It's got nothing to do with her skin, with her gut, whatever. But it has everything to do with animals being exploited. So how do you go from, I need to eat some animal products for my health, apparently, and I feel terrible about it, to check out my new furniture. Here's a rug and here's a couch. So it's that slippery slope, I think, is what I'm trying to say, is as soon as we start to see animals as something and not someone and a commodity that we can take from, it quickly filters down to other aspects of our life if we allow it to. And I wanted to mention, actually, we've been talking about this. This happened years ago. Tim Shieff, we remember, was actually in an ad promoting a wool suit.
Yeah, I don't know how this sort of went under the radar, but we remember watching the video. I think it was Paul Frank, which is the company that has the monkey as the logo.
Was that him? Was it that one?
Well, that's what I seem to recall. I could have got it wrong. Paul Smith?
Paul
Smith, Paul Frank, I'm not sure. But
someone Paul.
Possibly. Anyway, we probably should have looked into this.
Probably.
But we can remember the video, yeah?
Yeah.
He's doing all of his calisthenics, I think, in the suit. But the point is the suit was made from wool. And, of course,
and that was long before he started went back to trying a bit of fish and eggs.
Yeah,
so,
but it was, from what I understand, when Tim was vegan.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
Yeah. So I don't understand. Maybe that was just maybe there was an underlying issue there where he didn't totally understand vegan. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what was happening, but it was just something that we thought of when people mentioned to us about Bonnie's wool rug. We thought, remember that time Tim wore a wool suit? Not only wore it, but promoted it.
Yeah.
You know, he's encouraging other people to wear wool.
That's right. It makes you think, did these people ever really make the ethical connection? You know, they made some kind of connection, presumably.
Of course.
But it's, again, we've spoken about this so many times, it's not a switch that you simply, once it's turned on,
it's supposed to stay on.
It stays on. It's not like, you know, it's like other forms of discrimination. You don't wake up one morning and say, oh, okay, I haven't been racist for a while, I'm going to start being racist now. Do you know what I mean? Like, or replace it for any other form of discrimination.
Yeah,
you know?
I don't know. Anyhow, we're going to link some resources on the wool industry in the comments or in the notes.
And also down.
Yes, absolutely, because it's all about education. And once people see how incredibly cruel and violent these industries are, I think a lot of people don't realise how bad the wool industry is because, you know, sheep need to be shorn. But once you see it, oh my goodness. So please, if you're unsure about these industries, educate yourself so you can really make ethical decisions. All right, we digress back to Stella Raye. So basically her video had a huge emphasis on diet and on herself and how she was feeling, and it was very much the same story that we've heard from so many other people. The main problem was bloating, and she also craved animal products, in particular salmon.
You know, it's like people know what to say these days when they make these why I'm no longer vegan videos. So, for example... Because
they've seen so many other people do it and they've heard response videos and they know what the feedback's going to be.
In the comment section, that's right. So, for example, she said, you know, I made sure I put my calories into Chronometer to make sure that I was eating enough. And, of course, she said I was eating enough. Now, this is...
The devil's in the detail.
Right? It's subjective, yeah? I was eating enough. Stella Raye's mentioned that she comes from an eating disorder background.
Yeah.
So, you know, somebody with an eating disorder background, their idea of eating enough is not necessarily enough, you know, for one's energy requirements. Now, okay, she said that Chronometer said she was eating enough. Now, look, there's a few possibilities there. If you didn't put in your exercise, for example, then the calories are going to be understated.
Yeah.
Right? So that's just one possibility. And let's assume that she did put in the exercise that she was doing. The thing is, these calorie calculators like Chronometer, they're great tools if they're used in the right way, but they're also flawed in the sense that they're all based on the false assumption that all calories are utilised equally by the body.
Yeah.
Whereas a calorie from McDonald's is not utilised by the body the same way that a calorie from whole plant foods is. I'm pretty sure everyone can understand that, you know. A calorie from whole plant foods is high in dietary fibre, and also there's dietary thermogenesis. You know, the way the calories are burned after eating is different from those based on whole plant food, calories coming from whole plant foods versus, say, McDonald's. So,
or any animal products.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to come from McDonald's, that's the thing. Even if you're steaming salmon at home, it's still animal fat.
Yeah, and the point being that not all calories are utilised equally by the body, but these calorie tracking apps assume that they are. So I'll give you an example. We've tracked our calories many times on Chronometer. Great app. Just to see, you know, that you're hitting all of your nutritional requirements and what have you. Now, inevitably, we are always finding ourselves with a calorie surplus. So based on our basal metabolic rate and our activity levels, we're always eating several hundred calories more than Chronometer's suggesting that we need. And yet we don't gain weight.
No.
We need to eat that amount in order to maintain our weight.
Yeah, and what Chronometer is saying is if you're eating animal products, because it's assuming that you're not vegan, it's assuming that you're having the quote-unquote normal standard diet, right?
That's low in fibre, high in fat.
That you need to eat less because a calorie is not a calorie.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a massive difference. So it may be that she was following Chronometer's recommendations, but because she was eating a plant-based diet, that she wasn't getting enough calories actually. So that's the point. We're trying to explain how using these
calorie tracking apps can be flawed.
Exactly. They may cut you short. So that was, because she didn't tell us exactly how many calories she was eating, that's the first thing we thought. Maybe, and of course also she was talking about the fact that she was working out at the gym. So you may need more calories then again because you're really, you're working it, you're lifting. She may have needed more fat and more protein in her diet as well. So I don't know if she changed her macros at all. All of these things make a big difference. She was talking about the bloating being really bad. And for example, she had to kind of plan her wardrobe around her bloating so she couldn't wear crop tops.
And bloating is a real issue on a vegan diet because a vegan diet is typically higher in fibre and high fibre diets can be problematic, especially if you've eaten a low fibre diet for most of your life, as most people who have eaten a standard Western diet have done so.
Yeah.
So, there can be things like, first of all, working out what is causing the bloating. Maybe you need to use digestive enzymes initially, or maybe you need to use a probiotic.
I think she said she was doing those. She tried those. And
sometimes they can add fuel to the fire. I know when, years ago I was experimenting with probiotics for the candida that I was suffering from, they would actually make my bloating worse, for example. So
I don't know.
Digestion is a tricky one, but again, if one has made an ethical connection to the animals, they will go to the ends of the earth, certainly try everything within their means to work it out.
And so this is, always our advice is to get tested, get help. Goji Man is a great resource on YouTube that a lot of people are finding now since Bonnie Rebecca's video. And he explains why eating less fibre, yes, it's going to help with your bloating, obviously, but eating animal products is not solving the underlying issue. It's just putting a Band-Aid, if you like, on the problem, and that's a Band-Aid of an animal's life.
That's right.
So it's not the solution. I do want to talk about the fact that when Stella Raye was buying salmon at the store, she said, I felt like I was doing something wrong.
Yeah, now it was interesting. The way she said that could be interpreted ambiguously. On face value, you could take it as she actually genuinely felt like she was doing something wrong, as in she acknowledged the fact that she was about to pay for somebody's murdered body, for example. I, however, interpret it differently, and this is just me personally. I kind of felt like she kind of snickered a little bit at that point.
She did kind of snicker.
And I interpreted that snicker as, I can't believe that I was so naive to think that I was doing something wrong, when in actual fact, after purchasing and eating it, I felt better, which tells me that my body needed it. So I can't believe I formerly had the mindset that it was wrong, because actually it can't be wrong if my body needed it. Do you know what I mean?
I see where you're going. It's open to interpretation.
Yeah.
That's how you felt. I tend to kind of agree with you. I think the snicker gave it away a little bit, but who knows? Maybe she was just feeling nervous about making the video, and sometimes we giggle and snicker and laugh when we're not feeling really comfortable about saying something that's controversial.
That's right. I'd like to know what our listeners thought, so pop it in the comments.
Now, as she was cooking the fish and eating the fish, she said, and this is where there's a bit of contradiction, she says she felt good about it and her body felt great and her body was craving these foods, and so she felt good once the process of actually cooking and eating the fish had started. And then, of course, she had less bloating. So the whole idea is, yay, this is what my body needed. I've been, blah, blah, blah. I'm all better now. She then started eating some egg whites and then ended up eating whole eggs. And now she's ended up eating chicken as well. So again, feeling better because there's less fibre.
But of course, you also trade in one set of problems for another, because when you introduce animal products into your diet, you're starting to increase your risk of developing some of our leading causes of death, which is obviously a lot more problematic than bloating.
Yeah.
Not that bloating is great, but again, you can take steps to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah. So that's where she's at. She felt reassured by her acupuncturist that she was doing the right thing, and we were like, your acupuncturist? I mean, that's like, I don't know, asking your postman, is this okay that I'm eating these animal products? But, just what does your acupuncturist have to do with it? I don't know. If you want some real help, then see someone that's about, gut issues and gut health and someone that knows more about diet, not your acupuncturist.
That's right.
I think maybe she was just like
latching on anything that would affirm her decision to return to eating animal products.
Yeah. All right, one last thing is the oatmeal. She said she was extremely bloated after eating oatmeal, and you kind of relate to this.
I can. I remember when I used to eat oatmeal, but I hadn't sufficiently hydrated beforehand, I would find that it would give me terrible bloating pain, and it's really uncomfortable. So I know exactly what Stella was perhaps experiencing. And I solved it by simply making sure that I would drink enough water every time before I ate oatmeal. And that solved it 100% of times. You know, I've been eating it daily now for 3 years.
And you haven't had a problem?
No, I haven't had a problem once I worked out what was happening. I think it's because a lot of the time the oats continue to absorb water when they're being digested. And so if you haven't got enough water in there, it can create that bloating.
It makes sense.
That's what
you found.
That's what I experienced.
Yeah,
and
so I think
was able to overcome.
For anybody listening who may be experiencing this problem with oatmeal, because we're such oatmeal fans, don't cut the oatmeal. Maybe just try drinking more water before you eat.
Drink a quart and a half of water before.
Yeah, see how that goes.
At least say a quart.
Yeah. Okay, so they were our thoughts on Stella Raye's video and announcement. Again, obviously very disappointed, and it's a shame that so many animals are going to die as a result, and any influence she has over her audience to potentially go back to eating animals because they're experiencing bloating and feel encouraged by her. It's a lose-lose-lose on all levels.
So moving on to John Venus. Now, out of all the no longer vegan videos released lately, this was the most disturbing for us, even though he's not eating animals. He's still eating a plant-based diet. Yeah. John's video is titled, "Why I Don't Want to Label Myself as a Vegan."
And we're going to explain, I guess, why it was so disturbing for us, because obviously, I mean, that's kind of a weird thing for people to hear, maybe, the fact that he's not killing animals to put into his body. But what he says in that video, we felt really distressed by it, and so many people asked us to respond to this. And as I said earlier on, we do feel a very strong moral obligation to respond to this and break it down. We'll start by saying that we're not surprised at all.
No, not at all. We used to follow John, and we really enjoyed his videos, and we recommended people watch them for vegan bodybuilding tips.
He's a great example. He's a big guy who eats well, and, he's a great example for people to follow.
But we had to unfollow him quite a while ago now, because he started saying, he's okay with people eating animals. He doesn't care what people eat, and he was also talking down about vegans and vegan activists and the vegan community.
Yeah.
So at that point, we're like, well, yeah, we're going to unfollow because we just don't support that position.
Yeah, and this was a while ago, as we said. So when he put his video out, we're like, oh yeah, this is nothing really new. It's basically the same things he's been saying
various videos for a while.
Yeah, and that vegans are judgy and things like that, but just kind of condensed in one video. So I wanted to read out a quote from an older video of John's that kind of summarises. A while ago, he said,
"I don't think you have to be vegan. Definitely not. Of course, I would like you to be vegan because there are so many benefits apart from our own health and well-being, but it's a personal choice. If you feel amazing eating fish or whatever you eat, then go ahead with it."
And when we heard that, we're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Personal choice?
I mean, that's one of the 10 main excuses that not yet vegans use for not going vegan. And so, basically John was speaking like a not yet vegan as opposed to someone who had purportedly been vegan for years.
Well, I just don't feel like he understood that there is a direct victim involved. When you say it's a personal choice, you're literally cutting out the victim in that sentence because there's nothing personal about taking someone else's life.
No, like we always say, how you choose to style your hair, that's a personal choice, for example. There's no direct victim involved. But
what colour shirt you wear,
that's
your
right.
Personal choice.
But your food choices, when they involve a direct victim, cease to be personal.
Yeah. So we're kind of feeling like this is the epitome of an apologetic vegan.
The other thing, sorry, if I could, just wanted to say, it's very telling in John's language there. He said, if you feel amazing eating fish or whatever you eat.
Yeah. It's not whatever, it's whoever.
Yeah. So he's still not seeing animals seemingly as someone. He's still seeing them as something.
Instead of individuals.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, so this is kind of like the epitome of what we call an apologetic vegan, not just us, but
what is known as.
Yeah. And the whole idea is that you're trying to make carnists or non-vegans feel totally comfortable with paying for the violence towards animals and consuming the bodies of animals, whilst kind of almost rubbishing vegans, if you like, on the side, those who speak up and speak out against this violence. So it's kind of like we're not all on one team. I'm over here trying to make people who still want to eat animals quite comfortable with that, like you do you, and I'm going to support you, but don't worry about those really angry, full-on, 100%, what do you want to call them, vegans on that side? What do people call us? The all or nothing vegans? The actual vegans? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I was going to say actual vegans. You said it. All right.
Okay.
So I think for me, this all comes down to human psychology. And perhaps this is something we can talk about with Dr. Clare Mann, vegan psychologist, later on. I think these people care more about the opinions of not yet vegans than they do about the lives of animals. It's as simple as that for me. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so apologetic, and they wouldn't go to such lengths to try to make not yet vegans so comfortable about their choice to continue to pay others to slit animals' throats and chop their heads off.
Maybe. All I know is that when we were hearing this previously and now watching his most recent videos, we feel like he sounds like a non-vegan that we're outreaching at a queue.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is the kind of objections that we outreach people about. And it's like, how are you saying this as a vegan? I feel like I'm outreaching a non-vegan. That's all I can say. I don't know.
And not a new vegan at that.
No, I mean, he knows. Anyhow. So John's words and way of thinking, as we've said, are nothing new.
Nor unique.
No, because many people do think like him and feel like him, and we're hoping that this discussion today and our response will help people to understand more about what's behind this way of thinking, and also to learn how to respond to discussions and objections like this. I think that there is always a lot that we can learn from responding to videos like John. So although, and all of these response videos we do, there's something very unfortunate about them coming out and putting these things online, and yet there's something that we can always learn and grow from. So
definitely. Now, 1 or 2 days later, after John made that video saying why he no longer wants to be labelled as a vegan, he made a second video called "Let Me Explain Myself."
This was the follow-up.
The follow-up. This was the backpedaling video. He didn't. Apparently, John says that he didn't mean when he said, "I don't care," because this is what he was mostly criticised for in the comment section by people, because he did repeatedly say in that first video, "I don't care, I don't care, I don't care." And that's what stood out for us also. Now, in his backpedaling video, he claims that he didn't mean to say "I don't care," and that whenever he said "I don't care," what he really meant to say was that he doesn't judge non-vegans.
Now, this reminded us of Sarah Therese. We've made several response videos to her last year, right?
We made one last year and one a couple of years ago.
Okay. It's been a long time.
But the one last year is the one you're referring to.
Yeah, she made a backpedaling video trying to explain herself yet again and clarify how she misspoke.
Because in that video that she first made, she said she didn't care diddly squat about animals.
Yeah, so it's the same words kind of used that people were really like, what do you mean you don't care? So it's interesting, I guess, the parallel that we could see was that the backpedaling and then the explaining had to come out over the words "I don't care," which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, I think it shows that there's a growing concern against apathy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For us, there's actually no explaining needed. It's very simple for us, and this is how we're thinking about it. If you do care about animals and the planet, then you will also care if other people are hurting animals and the planet. If you don't care about other people hurting animals and the planet, then how can you truly care about animals and the planet?
Yeah, if you think about it, it's pretty simple, isn't it?
That's the conclusion we came to.
And we were wondering how this would all go down with the vegan protein powder company Vivo Life that John is a main ambassador for.
Yes.
So we've been told that he speaks for them at vegan events. Someone we know contacted Vivo Life asking what they thought of John's first video and comments. And we were told the boss of Vivo Life replied with a long voice message basically saying they can't control what John says or does, obviously, but they'll look into it and they will never change their morals and will always remain a 100% vegan company.
Now, that's excellent to hear. I'm really, really glad that they made that firm stance. And we have to be honest, we were thinking maybe, and of course we have absolutely no idea here, so we're just bouncing ideas off, maybe Vivo Life weren't too happy about John's statements of I don't care in his first video, and maybe this is what led John to make the second video explaining his comments of I don't care. We don't know. All I know is that if we were running a 100% ethical vegan company and one of our ambassadors put out to the world that he doesn't care what other people do to animals on the planet, I would not be too keen on having that person represent my brand and company and everything we stand for. Just saying, that's how we would feel as business people. No idea. Anyway.
Sure. And then there's also another possibility that if it's clear that John does care very much for the opinions of not yet vegans, hence that's why he doesn't want to label himself as a vegan, it's possible that he also cares about all of the backlash that he received in the comments section about people saying, you know, how can you say you don't care? And so perhaps it was, response to that as well.
Exactly. Again, we have no idea. We're just discussing it.
Seemingly caring about the opinions of others so much.
Okay, so we have taken some notes and key points from John's first video to address and discuss, and we've tried to keep them in the order that he said them, but let's see how we go.
So in John's first video, he says, in the beginning, I had a lot of strong feelings about this lifestyle.
He said, when I was new to it, I was learning about what happens to animals and the environment, and he said it was shocking to him and he was very passionate about spreading the message. And for us, this is a perfect example of what we always say. When we first go vegan, when we first see the truth, when we take that, which pill is it?
The red pill.
The red pill. I can't remember, red or blue. When we take that red pill and we see it for what it is, it's like, oh my gosh. And we go in, well, a lot of people do go in very like, I want to spread this message, and they're passionate about it, and that's fantastic. But if we don't stay involved in the material and in the community, in activism, or do something more.
By the material, do you mean the slaughterhouse footage and the factory farm footage? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like just keeping abreast of what happens to animals and watching things that come out, watching the new film Damien, for example. So just constantly having our finger on the pulse, if you like. Or ironically, whilst animals are
flatlining.
Yeah. Then what happens is it starts to become very far from our mind and far from our heart. And the passion, if you like, or the
initial shock as well?
Yes, it kind of dies down because it's very easy in this not yet vegan world to start to get swept up in the mainstream, which still thinks it's normal to do what we do to animals.
Yes.
So you can very easily get swayed away from that initial passion and determination to do something very strongly about it.
Yeah. So stay connected to the connection that you make is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
By continuing to connect with the suffering of the animals. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
John says that he doesn't want to be identified as that vegan guy.
To which we would respond, John, be that vegan guy. Be that guy. People often say, I don't want to be that person.
So what that means is they don't want to be that person that's, always talking about vegan things and always being critical of, why are you putting that in your mouth? Do you know what happened to the animals? Do you know what it's done to the planet? You're always, I guess, just considering everyone who is involved in every choice when it comes to food and clothing and entertainment. And it can be a little annoying for people around us. Right? And so a lot of people don't want to be that person that's annoying at the dinner table or, no, we can't go to the zoo because this is what happens. Oh, why can't we just have a fun day out at the zoo? It's just the zoo, right? So we get that. I think that vegan guy is a really great name. I mean, we're that vegan couple. I think it's got a nice ring to it, John.
I have to agree.
We don't mind being pointed out, that vegan couple. In fact, that's why we chose the name, because I remember many years ago we had a different name on the channel.
It's catchy and it sticks.
Well, people were saying, that couple there, that couple. And we're like, well, we're that vegan couple. So, it stuck.
So we came across a great meme on Instagram that reminds us of this. And the meme read, you can only be embarrassed by a label if you think the label itself is something to be embarrassed about.
Now, John might not necessarily be embarrassed by the label vegan, but basically if there's, I guess, nothing wrong with the word vegan and what it represents, then what's wrong with the label is our thinking.
Now, we agree with John in that vegans are the only group not discriminating against and exploiting others who have to wear the label that carries the stigma.
Yeah.
This is one of our pet peeves as well.
There shouldn't be the word vegan. There shouldn't be a label at all.
So, for example, if someone commits murder, we call them a murderer. If someone commits rape, we call them a rapist. If someone is racist, we call them a racist.
Yeah, we don't go around saying, I'm a non-murderer, I'm a non-rapist, I'm a non-racist. Right?
Yeah.
It's the person that is, as you said, committing the violence or the discrimination or whatnot.
That has to carry, that bears the label that carries the stigma.
Yeah.
Vegans are the only group not discriminating that have to wear that label. And so it's a double standard and it's totally unfair.
And this is why that fabulous line in the film Carnage, directed by Simon Amstel, which we did a review on our YouTube channel and we'll link. There's a poignant part in that film.
Pivotal moment.
When he says, or the character says, we're not vegans, they're carnists. Boom.
Yeah.
I've just given myself goosebumps. Yeah. Wow, it was so perfect.
That's right, because if we're to be morally and linguistically consistent, it should be carnists who bear the label that carries the stigma.
Yeah, not the vegans.
Yeah,
so,
the ones perpetrating, the ones oppressing, the ones paying for the violence and exploitation.
Yeah.
Sure, they should wear the label.
Yeah.
So, So in that respect, we do agree with John.
Yes.
However, we're not yet at that point in the film Carnage where he says, we're not vegans, they're carnists. Now, I believe we're going to get there because, again, to be morally and linguistically consistent, we will get there, right? But in the interim, we have to be courageous enough to wear the label that, unfortunately, we've currently been assigned.
And embrace it and represent it with everything we've got.
Knowing that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So John says that despite trying to be a very positive example of a vegan, he sees in the comments that so many people still have an opinion of vegans. They see vegans as being critical, being judgmental, being hateful, negative people, even shaming. And I guess these are the things that he doesn't want to be associated with.
Now, this is a really interesting point of discussion, and Gary Yourofsky has spoken about this in the past, where we look at previous social justice movement leaders that we all collectively admire, like Mahatma Gandhi, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Cesar Chavez. They were not necessarily popular in their time. In fact, they were despised by many because they were trying to create massive social change. Yeah. It's only with the benefit of hindsight that we look back at those people and go, yes, they were right, because racism and sexism and heterosexism and classism, they're all wrong.
Yeah. But at the time, they would have been perceived as critical and judgmental and maybe even hateful and
negative.
Negative. All of these things that vegans are now dealing with and criticised for may have also been the same thing that those people were dealing with at the time, because they were going against the grain. They were trying to change something that was very much ingrained in our society, in our culture, in our traditions, in our way of thinking.
Exactly.
And that's tough. I mean, you're going to come up against, all kind of criticism.
That's right.
No matter what you say, if you try to change it and you try to get people to change it with you, whew, good luck.
Exactly. And if you consider that speciesism, which we're going to talk about more shortly, is the root of all forms of discrimination like racism, sexism, heterosexism, ableism, classism, etc., then you're going up against the biggest ideology, the biggest belief system that we have in our human culture. So it's only natural that you're going to receive the greatest amount of criticism and resistance. And
I'm not surprised that
all.
vegans are called these things. But what gives me a lot of strength is when we go to actions and we see teenage girls, for example, they're out there on the street, or they're at a cube of truth, or they're at a disruption when we go through like a restaurant or a food court or whatnot, and they've got their vegan top on and they've got a sign that says, it's not food, it's violence or truth or whatever. And they are standing there proud and strong and representing, despite having people throw criticism at them, despite hearing, oh, go get a job, or, oh, you know, pee off or F off, or, you know, you hippies, or whatever kind of criticism they receive, they're still there, these young people. Like we see families bringing their kids along to these events and saying, no, this is right, and we're going to represent it, and we're going to do something about it, despite what the majority think of us disrupting your meal of steak. We are going to let you know that it's not okay, it's never okay, and we're going to stop this. And that really pees people off. But, you know, you're going to have the courage to stand up and take it and do it anyway, because we've got to do what's right, not what's popular. Which brings us to
Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous quote, "There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must take it because conscience tells him it is right."
And that sums it up. It's not popular what vegans do, vocal vegans, activists, but we do it because it's right, despite the criticism. Now, we were thinking, and a lot of people were putting this in the comments and messaging us about this, is John not being judgmental himself when he's saying vegans are judgmental?
Yeah.
Right? Are you judging me for judging? Right, judgy.
Now, we're fully aware that John and his supporters will say that we in this podcast episode are an exact example of the judgy vegans that John was talking about.
Yes. We don't
Here's
care.
the thing, we don't care. What would the animals want? That is what we're always asking ourselves.
Yeah.
We're putting ourselves continuously in the position of the victim and looking at it from their perspective. And we're defending animals who are the victims the way we would want to be defended if we were in their position, if our lives were on the line.
Now, let's be clear about definitions here.
And just before you get into the definitions, I just want to say, the perception of a lot of not yet vegans who are, of course, paying others to slit throats and chop heads off, that's what's happening here, is that any vegan that vocalizes veganism in any way, shape or form, basically if you're a vegan and you open your mouth about veganism, you're judging. You know?
Yeah.
So
come on.
It's a double standard, isn't it?
Absolutely. All right, definitions. Definition of judge.
Form an opinion or conclusion about.
Definition of judgment.
The ability to make considered decisions or come to sensible conclusions.
So unless you're brain dead and you are literally not thinking, you can't think, everyone is judging because we are all thinking and we all have an opinion. It is a normal thing to do, and I really feel like we need to drop the judgy stigma.
Oh, definitely. It's completely unwarranted. If we think about it, do we judge racism, sexism, heterosexism, ableism, ageism? Yes, we do. So why shouldn't we be judging speciesism? You know, what if other social justice groups didn't judge? Would anything have ever changed in the world? Judgments are required to come to sensible conclusions that those forms of discrimination are wrong, and that's the conclusion that we need to come to when it comes to speciesism.
I am concerned when people aren't judging these things critically. And we can replace that word, again, it's become a dirty word to judge. Replace it with thinking critically.
Yeah.
Right? I'm concerned when people aren't thinking critically about what we're doing to animals on the planet. I'm concerned when we don't say anything when we see something is wrong. We've got to drop the judgment is a dirty word. It's not. It's just thinking critically and vocalizing it. We should be holding people accountable. That doesn't mean if someone doesn't know the truth, there's a difference.
Exactly.
Right?
I'm glad you said that, because I know a lot of people listening will likely be thinking, oh, how can you possibly judge a not yet vegan that doesn't know any better?
There's a difference. Of course, we were not yet vegans once upon a time.
Almost every vegan was.
Yeah,
so
we
of
don't
course
know.
it would be hypocritical to go around judging not yet vegans who don't know any better.
That's different. That's where you need to be 100% compassionate and understanding that we didn't know. We've all been indoctrinated into this culture called carnism.
And you can watch hundreds of videos that we've made to other non-vegan YouTubers that are in that position where they don't know, and they're all very educational and approached
education
with compassion.
is key.
And the same with our outreach conversations.
Yes, of course. But once people know, and especially if you're on social media these days, you've seen something, you know something, you got to start putting things together. And if you know everything and you choose to still participate in something that is destructive and violent and affecting the lives of humans and non-human animals,
then you need to be held accountable for that, because other people's and other animals' lives are at stake.
John says, I always try to be as loving as possible. Now, not caring if someone else is exploiting someone, that's not really loving in our eyes.
It's more enabling, actually. Like if we just change the scenario and the victim here, for example.
Because I just want to say before you give your example, changing the scenario and the victim is kind of like the only way a lot of people can relate to what animals are going through, when we have to kind of humanize the situation.
And this is because speciesism is our, dominant ideology in our human culture. So, for example, let's say I hear that my mate Dave is beating his partner Jane. So there's domestic violence there. Now, I would never ever say, obviously, I don't care that Dave's doing that. That's his personal choice.
That's Dave's business. He can live his life how he wants.
Exactly. I mean, I would be abhorred by that. And I would obviously try to stop Dave beating Jane in any way that I could by, at least having a talk to Dave and say, hey, domestic violence, that's terrible, Dave. Is there something I can help you with? Because, clearly Jane's suffering here. No one should have to go through that, etc., whatever.
Now, would you be judging Dave for intervening in the violence and calling him out in his violence?
That's right. Would people be calling me negative or critical or hateful because I was trying to help out Jane, the victim, by talking to Dave about his problem?
Right. So replace Dave and Jane for cows and chickens and pigs and fish, and for consumers of those animal products. Same thing. Simply intervening, speaking the truth, calling people out for what they're doing.
Yeah, making people accountable for their wrongful acts. And the reason people often fail to make that connection is because of speciesism. So, for example, people don't see cows, pigs, chickens, ducks, turkeys, fish, sheep, etc. as the equivalent of Jane.
Yeah.
Now, we're all equivalent. We're all animals for starters. There's just human animals and non-human animals, but we're all individuals and we all have the capacity to suffer. And that's all that really matters.
Yeah.
And we all want to live our lives in peace, free from harm. We seek pleasure. We avoid pain. And in those ways, we're equal.
Exactly. So, no, we obviously disagree with John saying that he's trying to be as loving as possible, but if you are enabling people to continue violence, then that is not a loving action from our perspective. He goes on to say that many of plant-based people aren't like that at all, meaning a lot of plant-based people aren't negative and judgy and et cetera, et cetera.
And that's totally understandable, because there's a huge difference between someone who's just eating a plant-based diet and someone who's actually vegan.
Yeah.
And that difference is ethics. For example, a vegan has made an ethical connection. They are fully aware and they have fully allowed the pain and the suffering that the animals endure into their hearts.
Yeah. And this leads to something called Vystopia, which we're going to talk later on with vegan psychologist Clare Mann, it's fascinating what she has done to explore this issue. And I think it really helps vegans understand why they feel like they feel and why there is such a difference between where vegans are coming from and where someone eating a plant-based diet is coming from. So
that's right, because like you touched on earlier, none of these people who are going back to eating animal products, none of them are actually animal rights activists, for example.
Yeah.
You'll never see an animal rights activist go back
No.
to eating animal products, right? But somebody who's just eating a plant-based diet who hasn't made that same degree of ethical connection. It's, in my personal opinion, most people eating a plant-based diet, or a lot of people for sure, eating a plant-based diet, if science came out tomorrow and said that eating animal products was the healthier option for humans, would switch back to eating animal products in a heartbeat.
Maybe. If you don't have that ethical connection, then it's easy to do. John says that many of his plant-based friends do not share that negative perspective of the world at all. So he always talks about wanting to be around positivity and a lot of positive people. And we were kind of questioning, well, is not caring what other people are doing being positive? To us, that's willful ignorance or apathy. That's not positivity. That's just keeping your head in the sand, right?
It's easy to stay positive when all you're doing is, looking at smoothie bowls and mussels, and, when activists are actually standing outside the front of slaughterhouses and hearing the screams of pigs being lowered into gas chambers, before they have their throats slit and their heads chopped off.
I think from that perspective, what you've just described, Luca, try and stay positive from that perspective, and it's a whole new ballgame. And unless John wants to put himself into that situation, I invite him to come and join us. Come with us, John, and be there, hear it, feel it, smell it, see it, and then be that amazing, positive, everything's okay kind of guy. You're talking about two different worlds. And I'm not saying that animal rights activists can't be positive and aren't. We all try our absolute best, but there is a very dark reality that we expose ourselves to. And I don't think that it's fair to say, oh, you're so negative when you're got no idea of what that's like.
Yeah.
You know, you're talking about it from two different worlds almost.
And as you said,
because it's different looking at it from a screen. I know that he's watched like Earthlings or whatever, but that's totally different. When you're there and you smell it and you feel it and you see it, it's totally different.
And again, I do, as you have done, encourage John to attend in person. Having said that, I personally believe that you can get a similar feel by watching the footage, but it can't just be 5 years ago when you first went vegan, you saw one slaughterhouse, video, for example. That's not going to, as you touched on before, necessarily keep you connected to the ethics and the suffering of the animals, which is what veganism is about, and the exploitation of the animals. It's going to, for 5 years, because this largely non-vegan world that we live in, where eating animals has been so normalized and using them for other purposes as well, because it's not just about the food.
Yeah, but I think if you get to the point where John, or the place where John is at right now, I think he would greatly benefit from attending a Save Movement vigil, for example, because obviously what he's seeing on the screen is not enough. Sure. I feel like he needs to be there and see the animals and touch them and feel them and smell them and hear it and just all of it. It's
just to allow it deeper into his being, if you like.
Exactly.
His conscience and his psyche and all of it, his heart, his soul.
Yes, it's intensifying that experience because you can't smell it through the screen. You can't. There's something energetically I feel that happens as well. I've got to be honest. When you've got a truck full of animals that are about to go in to have their throats slit, there's a different energy to being there outside of a slaughterhouse. So I feel like I really want him to experience that and then talk to me about why vegans aren't positive.
Sure. And you know what? It's not to say that John still can't be positive. John can still be positive with his health and his lifestyle, his smoothie bowls and his muscles. That's fantastic. That aspect of what John does is needed. It's wonderful. It inspires people. It attracts not yet vegans to a vegan lifestyle. It's great. What that kind of experience outside a slaughterhouse, for example, would help John do is it would help him feel more comfortable about continuing to call himself a vegan, and it would make him far less ready to judge vegan activists, for example, for being very vocal about animal rights and veganism and what have you.
And change his perception of us as being negative and judgmental, etc. Because he did say, I have nothing wrong with vegan activists. I think it's very important to be out there and show people footage and educate people. He's all for that.
But at the same time, he did judge it and was critical of it.
Because you're negative and you're judgmental and you're bashing and whatever. So it's like, well, which camp are you in,
And I think John would also, by the same token, be less likely to say, I don't care if other people eat animals.
Absolutely. One thing we did want to mention here is that, if the burden of animal rights activism was shared more across different people and more people went and did the things that a small group are doing right now, I think
the amount of negativity that each activist would have would be diminished because that negativity would be shared over more consciences.
Like spread the negativity. No, but what we mean is it would be lessened for each person because we feel very burdened by it.
Yeah.
And so it becomes,
because there's so few of us.
Yeah, but if everyone did a little bit more, then I think
that burden is shared.
Not only is the burden shared, but the positivity would rise collectively.
Of course, because of the human psychology of wanting to be involved with whatever the majority is doing.
Yeah.
Sure, it might not be, but it'll become a growing majority, a growing body, if you like.
It would just help so much.
It won't feel like it's such a minority and that you're all alone and there's only a few of you in the world doing it.
Right. So he goes on to say that some of his closest friends are meat eaters and they don't care about that an animal goes through certain things. Those people are still about spreading positivity and living a positive message. So certain things is literally what he said here, that his friends don't care about that an animal goes through certain things.
Now, the word certain things is a euphemism. It reminds
and he kind of paused when he said it, like he was like, there was a little bit of...
He wasn't sure what words to choose, and he ended up choosing the words certain things.
Yeah.
Now, I found, again, it was a euphemism. I found it was very much like when the industry says, for example, we process and harvest animals, for example. No, what's actually happening is that the animals are being forced against their will to have their throats slit and their heads chopped off, amongst other horrible things like mutilations and torture and what have you. So to diminish those, the act of murder, the act of taking one's life, which is all these animals have, down to the words certain things, I found it was very disrespectful to the animals. I found it was dishonest to his audience, and it was sugarcoating what these animals actually endure and what they go through.
That was his opportunity to call it for what it is and say to his audience, it's not certain things, this is exactly what the animals experience. But he didn't take that opportunity. He just sugarcoated it and kind of played it off as though, oh yeah, just certain things happen to them, detail it, say it for what it is.
But if he were to detail it, then he would find it a lot harder to say, I don't care or I don't judge.
Yeah, exactly. And we understand why he chose those words, and it's because it's the path of least resistance.
Which is what humans tend to go towards all the time, because we don't like things that make us uncomfortable, of course.
No.
Now, if John were to address what animals endure the way I just spoke about before, that is going to create discomfort for him, because he's going to be concerned about what his not yet vegan audience is thinking, and his not yet vegan family members and friends and what have you, right? So it's a lot easier for John just to say certain things because to say he doesn't care, and to be apathetic about what other people are doing to animals. Because it just creates less discord in John's life and in John's mind.
Yeah. John said, I don't identify with what the general consensus of veganism is.
And what he means is, I don't think he is contending the general consensus of the definition of veganism.
No, I think he understands that.
Yeah, definitely. What he means, we think anyway, is that other people see veganism as something judgmental, negative, critical, hateful, etc., and he doesn't want to be perceived in the same way.
Yeah. Okay, so here's another perspective to consider. Our inbox is full of positivity. It's full of thank yous.
Together with all the negativity from all the not yet vegans throwing all the trolls, hate and everything.
And also a lot of negativity thrown at us from plant-based eaters or apologetic vegans who are like John, saying, oh, you're too judgmental, you're too critical, you
make the rest of us vegans look bad.
Yeah, how many times? I mean, there are videos out there saying that we make veganism look bad. So we've got all that negativity, but we stay focused and say what needs to be said for the victims, and yet our inbox is still full of positivity. It's full of thank yous, and I can't believe it, and thank you for speaking the way you do. And we post something almost every day just to, again, create that balance.
If it wasn't for you, I'd never have gone vegan, and my family wouldn't have gone vegan, etc., etc., etc.
So we've got, how many 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds messaging? Kids saying thank you, creating that positive balance in our life. It's not all doom and gloom. Just because you're critical and judgmental or whatever you want to call it, there's still a hell of a lot of positivity that comes with spreading the message the way we do and other activists do. So it's not all one side, one general consensus of what veganism and vegans are.
That's right.
Absolutely not. So John says, I don't care if people eat animals, if people don't care about the environment or their health. I don't feel bad when people eat meat in front of me.
So in his second video, John says, when I said I don't care, I meant I don't judge. Now, not caring and not judging, they're not synonymous.
No.
Right? So
they're not meaning they don't mean the same thing.
They don't mean the same thing. And here's the thing. John didn't make a live video. John pre-recorded this video, edited it, and uploaded it subsequently. Now, if whilst editing it, and you'd think that he would be really editing it with a
very critical eye.
A critical eye, exactly.
Because this is a massive
video,
change in his channel.
Exactly. So you would think that if he really meant to say, I don't judge, as opposed to I don't care, given that he says I don't care like 10, 15 times, that would have stood out to him and he would have thought to himself, oh no, I've misspoken there. That's the wrong thing. Let me re-record the video and say what I actually mean, which is I don't judge. But
that didn't happen.
That didn't happen. So, I just really feel like if that were the case, when editing it, John would have taken that opportunity to correct his misspoken words, apparently.
Basically, we don't buy it.
No.
Yeah, that's how we're feeling. Again, what do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. So the words I don't care, that's what we're going to go with because that's what he said. And as we said, we believe that's what he meant.
He indicated he was speaking his truth at the time. We had no reason to doubt
Yeah.
or question otherwise.
Those 3 words, I don't care, are 3 words that any human being with the privilege of knowing the truth should never say. We all live on planet Earth, okay? We're not from our own individual planets. We're not from Mars. We're not from Venus, pardon the pun. We don't live in our own individual bubbles. We are on one planet and we are all Earthlings.
And there is an animal holocaust. People are dying of starvation every day. Entire species are being wiped out. Our rainforests are being destroyed. Our oceans are dying, and we have 12 years, according to UN scientists, before climate change heats this planet up to the point of no return, which is going to create millions of environmental refugees. So all of this is connected to eating meat, dairy, and eggs. So at this point, surely apathy is not an option.
I don't care. That attitude is what got us into the shit we're in, basically. That's what got us to this point. And it's really going to take every single one of us caring enough to stop participating in animal agriculture and being vocal about it to help others learn the truth if we have any chance of turning things around. And it reminds us of this incredible poem called First They Came.
Yeah, it's written by the German pastor Martin Niemöller. It's about the cowardice of German intellectuals following the Nazis' rise to power and subsequent incremental purging of their chosen targets group after group. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me.
We feel that John can't see himself as the victim. He can't connect or relate to what the animals are going through, and so he can't empathize with them. But if he was able to put himself in the position of our animal cousins, in that situation where it's life or death, if it was his family, his child that was being taken, would he then want someone to speak up and wear the vegan label and be vocal and be critical of what others are doing? Would he then care enough about what others are doing if what others were doing affected his life and the life of the people that he loves so much?
And if the feedback he got from others was that he was being negative, judgmental, hateful, etc., would he have the courage to stand up and say, actually, no, I am simply standing up for justice and peace and compassion and respect, and this is a loving thing to do, not a hateful thing to do.
And it might not be popular to do it, as we said before, but it's still the right thing to do, and so I'm going to do it anyway. He goes on to say that there's a superiority or elitism amongst people promoting the vegan lifestyle. And again, I have to say, it just feels like we're outreaching non-vegans. A lot of non-vegans say this. Vegans think they're so superior. You think you're better than everyone. Veganism is elite. There's nothing special about being vegan. Like, this is what I don't understand. It is the most ethically basic thing to do, not to slit the throat of an innocent being for absolutely no reason other than it's convenient and it tastes good for 5 minutes. That's the baseline. There's nothing elite about that. Ironically, it's vegans who don't feel that they are superior to anyone, including non-human animals. That's why we're vegan. So there's nothing superior about it. We don't feel like we're better than people. We just feel like we're making better decisions than people. And that's the truth. It's morally superior not to kill an innocent being if you don't have to. That's not a judgment, that's a fact.
A fact.
Right?
And how is it elite to not pay people to do the dirty work of slitting throats and choosing to eat instead some of the cheapest foods on the planet like rice and beans? How is that elite? I mean, a plant-based diet is sometimes called a peasant diet because it is eaten by some of the world's poorest people. Rice, beans, legumes, etc.
Exactly. So John is recording this video in his in-laws' house, meaning his wife's family, and he says that they are hunters and they fish, And he's in a room with about 15 carcasses, as he describes. We're imagining heads are mounted around the walls and there are skulls on the table in front of him. And he says that he has no problem being in that room.
Now, this was really interesting to us because it reminded us very much of an experience we had in Montana, cattle country, around 11 years ago, where we went horse riding. We weren't vegan at the time, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't have been exploiting horses in that way. But we were sitting in the horse trainer's home.
No, you got it wrong.
I got it wrong?
Yeah. We were having horse riding lessons and we needed to use her bathroom. And she said, go inside, down the corridor, turn left or whatever.
That's right. Yes.
So we went into the house and across from the bathroom was the living room. And I guess, well, we weren't snooping. You just look left, look right, wherever
It was a huge living room. The door was open. You're looking...
So we turned left and we had a look. And my God, did our jaws drop. We didn't know that they were hunters. And this room, huge room, was
a trophy room of innocent beings' heads.
Wall to wall, covered in heads. It was, and they had stuffed bears, like standing, every animal you could imagine. Just the whole room was covered. And we froze.
Yeah. We couldn't believe it. It was like walking into like a horror film type thing.
It's like a psychopath's house.
Yeah, a psychopath's house. But we were, of course, so hypocritical of us because we were not vegan and still eating all animals at that point. And yet it seemed very psychopathic, as you said, and macabre to us and just totally wrong, again, hypocritically. And, we actually said to each other, how could she love horses so much but have other animals killed and stuffed and mounted on her walls?
Yeah.
Like her hypocrisy stood out to us whilst we were being hypocritical.
Yeah.
But the point is, we were shocked. And it was awful for us to see
and it was
at that time.
Bad feeling, it really felt wrong on all levels. And when we left the house and went back outside, we were like, should we say something? We looked at her differently, like, what are you doing killing these innocent animals?
And your point being here, I think, is that we felt bad then as non-vegans, but we can't imagine sitting in that same or walking past that same room now as a vegan, how we would feel.
So I don't understand basically how John can sit in that room and say that he's got like no problem sitting there and doesn't feel anything, and he's totally fine. He has no problem with being in that room with murdered heads around the place. That just bamboozled us, I guess. It took us right back to that experience in Montana, as you said. He goes on to say, I don't have anything against them doing that, meaning hunting and fishing. I did at the beginning, but then he goes on to say, I don't feel bad if they go out there and shoot deer. I love this family. So my brother is actually a hunter. And I don't know if he still hunts, to be honest. I mean, he did that many years ago, and it's something we just don't go there anymore. But he could, possibly. Now, I love him as my brother, as my family, but I don't like what he does, and I don't approve of what he does, and I'm never going to make him feel okay with killing animals, and I'm never not going to call myself vegan to make him feel more comfortable or to, quote unquote, help our relationship. Again, I'm not going to enable him to kill for the sake of our relationship. I mean, that to me is not loving action, that's enabling violence. So you can still, my point is, you can still love family members, but you don't have to be okay with what they're doing when it comes to taking the lives of innocent beings.
Yeah. Now, we think, like most people, John doesn't like to feel agitated. He doesn't want strained relations or uncomfortable feelings of acknowledging that people around him are exploiting animals. So instead, he chooses to ignore the exploitation, as like a form of coping mechanism.
That's
Again,
what I was
it's the path
thinking
of least resistance,
Yeah.
because this is the thing that most vegans find most challenging, and that is the relationship dynamics with their not yet vegan family and friends and colleagues, for example.
Yeah.
It's the hardest thing.
And that's why a lot of people keep their mouths zipped. They don't say anything.
Which is not the answer. Again, that's enabling. If it was any other form of discrimination, again, just replace the victim and change the discrimination. If a family member was being racist or sexist or heterosexist,
would you accept that?
Would you keep closed-lipped then, or would you, speak about it?
Let's use this example. Just another scenario. If your family member was racist and they had a room and they were part of a Ku Klux Klan, for example, and they had pictures all around their walls of violence towards black people and things that Ku Klux Klan members do, would you be okay with sitting in that room? Right?
Yeah.
And again, I'm just saying violence is violence, discrimination is discrimination. When we look at it from the victim's perspective, they just want it to stop.
That's right.
And to be okay with that is, I don't know. Personally, I think there's almost like a struggle, if you like, for him to accept the reality and empathise with the victims, whilst simultaneously having an untainted or perfect relationship with his in-laws, if you like. Again, this is something I think a lot of people struggle with. It's something we have to deal with as vegans on a regular basis. I kind of felt like a little kid that doesn't want to face the facts and accept reality. You know, like when kids put their fingers in their ears and like, la 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 la, I'm not listening, la 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 la. You know, like trying to keep distance. Like if I don't hear it and I don't accept it and I don't let it in, then it's not really happening. That's kind of how I felt watching and listening at this point.
And we've got several podcast episodes that can help people navigate this difficult terrain of vegan and not yet vegan relationships with family members and friends.
Yeah.
Ones that you and I have discussed, and also where we've invited Dr. Melanie Joy and Clare Mann onto the show to discuss those issues. And we'll link those in the references for this podcast.
So, speciesism.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. All we have to ask ourselves is, for example, if John's in-laws shot dogs in China, would he be comfortable with that? Or would he not care if they did that? Or would he not judge them for doing that, even if they knew better?
Yeah, right. So again, we're just replacing the victims. And this is an animal, just switching the animal. And also all of these, no longer vegan videos that come out, if these people were eating dogs or cats instead of chicken and fish, would their audience not judge them and not be saying, oh, that's okay, you do you? Would it be a different outcome? We just have to question why we accept violence towards certain animals and not others. If we're comfortable with one, then we should be comfortable with all. And if we're not comfortable with all, then we shouldn't be comfortable with any.
Desmond Tutu once said, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Now, of course, John, living a vegan lifestyle himself, has not chosen the side of the oppressor in that instance. However, his I don't care, an apathetic attitude, and I don't judge what others are doing in terms of exploiting animals can definitely be perceived as being neutral in others' injustice towards animals, and therefore he has sided with the oppressor in that sense. So in John's original video that he filmed in his in-laws' home with the carcasses mounted on the walls, there was also a deer's skull on the table in front of him, and he picked it up, and we couldn't help but notice how casually and flippantly he picked up the deer skull and set it down. It was as if it had been a remote control or a book or some other object, some other thing.
Because he was saying, like, I'm here with all these carcasses, and there's even a deer skull here.
Yeah, and in actual fact, he said deer and whatever.
Yes.
And so again, the language, not only his body language with how he treated the skull, but then his language where he said whatever, deer and whatever. Again, it all points to John still somehow seeing animals as less, or non-human animals as less than human animals.
Because it's not whatever, it's whoever.
It's whoever.
It's someone,
it was an individual that, your in-laws shot. I don't know, maybe it's a coping mechanism. Maybe he doesn't have to face the reality that his in-laws are actually killing living sentient beings who didn't want to die if he just diminishes them in his mind or reduces them to akin to material objects.
And our question is, would he be so flippant about picking up that skull on the coffee table if it was the skull of a dog instead of a deer?
Or a cat that his in-laws had shot and killed.
And would his audience be okay with that? Because I think so many people just, don't react to it or don't notice it, or it's just a skull. That's someone's skull. Let's break it down for what it is,
Now, Captain Paul Watson from Sea Shepherd has a very fitting quote. He says, if you want to know where you would have stood on slavery before the Civil War, don't look at where you stand on slavery today. Look at where you stand on animal rights. So what he means by that is it's all very well to say in 2019, 150 plus years since human slavery was, abolished in the law. Yes, I want to acknowledge that human slavery still exists in many forms, and it is, of course, completely wrong and needs to be eradicated. But we all accept that changes were made 150 years ago by abolitionists, and laws were passed. Right, so it's very easy to say, oh yeah, I would have been against human slavery if I had lived back in that day. Well, in actual fact, what Paul Watson is saying is really to analyse that question and how what your position would have been. on human rights is to look at where you stand on animal rights today, because the point is the mindset is the same. The mindset back then amongst the majority of white people, because, hey, it was enacted into law, was that white people are superior to black people.
Or black people were property
under the law. And the mindset today is that non-human animals are inferior to human animals, and they are property under our law, right? So
we have to think of it from the current cultural situation that we're in, not in hindsight of when the laws change and the culture changes. Right now, if you still see animals as things and objects and commodities for us to use, and it's just kind of okay what we do to them. I mean, let's just take what we do to animals and change the victim again, replace the victim and the language that we use. Oh, this, whatever, I'm okay with this. You can do whatever you want because, you know, it's your life and whatever. Change the victim and pretend we're talking about another human being of a different colour. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, you can't say that. What is that? That's insane.
Yeah. I can imagine a time 50 years from now when animal rights have been won and enshrined into legislation, when a video like John's, where he picked up that deer skull so flippantly and casually and said, you know, deer or whatever, would be looked at like a video of someone made now of a person from 150 years ago, when human slavery was still in place, you know, say a slave master picking up one of their deceased slave skulls and saying, you know, whatever. You know what? Do you know
I know,
what I mean?
And it sounds really, really critical of John right now, and we're not saying that he's a slave master.
No.
We're not saying that he's pro-slavery.
We're talking about the mindset and the dominant ideology of speciesism and the cultural indoctrination. And John's just he's just offered an opportunity to speak about this.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. It's a difficult one. I think it's a sensitive issue, but I do think, as you said, in like 50 years from now, we will look back and we will analyse what's happening now.
And what we did to animals and think, that was completely unjust and unnecessary. How could we have ever done that? They didn't deserve that.
All right. He goes on to say that he doesn't feel bad about people going to McDonald's and getting a hamburger. He says, life is tough and has many ethical dilemmas. So honestly, again, I feel like I'm outreaching a non-vegan because it's not about being perfect. Yes, life has many ethical dilemmas, but it's about causing the least amount of harm, and who we choose to put on our plate 3 times a day is pretty simple to do. You know, not feeling bad about people going to McDonald's and getting a hamburger, I find that really difficult to hear coming from a vegan.
Assuming the person going to McDonald's and eating the hamburger knows better.
Yeah, but even if they don't know better, I would still feel bad about that person going to McDonald's and eating the hamburger.
Because you know how bad it is for the animals, their health and the environment.
Yes, I would feel sympathy for that person that didn't know what they were participating in, and I would want to try and help them, but I'd certainly feel bad about it. I would not be okay with anyone going into McDonald's and ordering anything other than their vegan options, right? So what we found is that he tends to kind of overcomplicate things, and he kept saying throughout his video that it's more complicated, it's more complicated. And we're like, what is more complicated, John? Come on, let's keep this really simple, because to the victims, to the animals, it's really, really simple for them. They don't want to have their throats slit, full stop. We don't need to slit their throats, full stop. John knows this, but he's okay with other people participating in it. Yeah.
Former sniper Damien Mander turned vegan activist spoke about this in a podcast recently that we did with him.
Yes.
Yeah? And he said, you know, just don't stick the shit in your mouth.
Yeah.
You know, and if you do, don't call yourself an animal lover because you're full of shit. You know, I mean, he put it
out there. He really did.
Plain and simply.
So, yeah, again, I just want to emphasize that, yes, there are many different ethical dilemmas that we have in life, right? But we can't basically...
They're not a moral justification to continue needlessly killing animals.
Thank you.
You know, okay, let's say, you know, we buy a pair of sunglasses that is made in a sweatshop in China, for example. Not good, obviously. You know, we need to have a mass revolution of the way we produce everything. From food, clothing, the lot of it, right? Now, the reality is, you can't equate the two. You can't say that, oh, just because... So if you buy those sunglasses, I can continue to eat animal products. No, it doesn't work like that. For one, you don't buy sunglasses 3 times a day, every day for as long as you live.
And someone isn't having their throat slit for those sunglasses 3 times a day, every single day for as long as you live.
Yeah.
So it's...
You can't conflate the two.
Exactly. We need to keep it really simple when it comes to veganism. You go to the store, you pick up the plant products instead of the animal products. It's that easy.
Yeah. It's not a moral dilemma.
No.
It's very straightforward.
Just because we can't do everything doesn't mean we shouldn't do something. And the least we can do is be vegan.
So John says, the hate that I see online is so embarrassing. People lack so much perspective and positivity. And as I read that, I'm absolutely sure, as we mentioned earlier, that John will be thinking exactly that of this response.
Oh, yeah. I don't think he will even listen to it, but that's okay. We have to put it out there for everybody else. And again, as we said, we're speaking for animals. That's the main thing. So again, how about John joins us at a slaughterhouse, and from that perspective, he can remain as positive as he likes. But if he wants to stay in a totally different world and keep himself sheltered from the reality of what goes on and be okay with other people participating in that violence, well, sorry, but I find that attitude embarrassing. I've got to be honest.
Yeah, I as we were watching it, and he, kept hearing him say, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care, essentially about whether other people are exploiting animals and the environment. I was feeling embarrassed for him. I couldn't believe that he was going to put that out on his channel.
Yeah. When he says the hate that I see, I feel like that's a massive double standard, because vegans are speaking out against hate.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm hating what we do in the world. I'm hating what I see, and I'm going to speak out against the hate that I see.
Ironically, there's those T-shirts for McDonald's, who their tagline is, I'm loving it.
Yeah,
that say, I'm hating it.
Right. I mean, what we're speaking...
But John's not hating what happens at McDonald's.
Oh. So we're speaking out against hateful actions. They're not loving, peaceful, positive actions when we pay others to kill animals so we can eat them because it's our personal choice. Yeah, that's not love. That is hate. That's a hateful thing to do.
And just because you speak out about those hateful actions doesn't make your words hateful. No. It's the opposite.
Is shooting an innocent animal and causing unimaginable pain to a suffocating fish not hate? Is that not what his in-laws are doing? They are shooting innocent animals and they're pulling fish out of their home and killing them? That is a hateful action.
How is that positive or loving?
It's not. And this is where I feel like his language is Orwellian. I feel like his entire perspective is upside down, inside out. It's Orwellian what he's saying. I'm going to be okay with all of these violent, terrible, hateful things that people do to animals. I'm okay with that. I'm not going to participate in it, but I'm okay with them doing it. But if you speak out against that, then that's hateful. And don't judge their hateful, violent actions. I've given myself a headache.
I know.
I feel like I've got a headache right now. I just...
And it reminds me very much of a video put out by a YouTube channel called Top Fives. I think they've got like over 3 million subscribers. And they put this video out about a year ago, and it's had over 170,000 views. It was about the Yulin Dog Festival. And it was a very critical piece.
I remember that.
About the Yulin Dog Festival. And the person who put it together and narrated was speaking very passionately.
Yeah.
Now, would John look at that video and say, oh, that's hateful, that's judgmental, how embarrassing?
Replace the victim, same thing.
Because he was just speaking exactly like any animal rights activist would speak for cows, pigs, chickens, ducks, turkeys, fish, lamb, and the other animals that we exploit.
Whether we're eating them, wearing them, using them, shooting them, hunting them, whatever. It's the same thing. Okay, let's just take a deep breath. I feel like we're getting really worked up here. I'm getting a bit sweaty. I think this next quote was kind of the most... all right. He says...
I just don't care. If someone wants to quit and eat hamburgers at McDonald's, that is okay with me. 100% you do you. It doesn't matter. I have no judgment whatsoever. I don't care how you live your life. You only have one life and you have to live it by your terms and not care what anyone else thinks. Now, this is why we said we found John's video more disturbing than the other Why I'm No Longer Vegan videos.
This was the part where we just went, what is happening right now in front of us? It's just... So John is a father. He has a new baby. Does he not care what he hands down to his son? Does he not care what kind of a world he passes on to his child? Does he not care what his child may think about one day seeing this video or hearing these opinions that his father doesn't care what other people do about all of these things happening in the world? Now, I can relate to this from a very personal experience where I had someone in my life that I love dearly say that I agree with you, what's happening is bad, I support what you're doing, I think what you're doing is fantastic, but I don't care. And when I heard those words from someone that I looked up to and still, of course, love, a part of me died, if you like, crumbled, was crushed. A part of my inner world just collapsed.
It was soul-destroying for you.
It was. They are very difficult words to hear from somebody that you really love and that's part of your life. Caring is so important.
And so what you're wondering is, based on your personal experience, is what will John's son think in years to come if he were to see this video?
Yeah. Or again, as I said, even just hear the words or through discussions or get the feeling that his father doesn't care. And it's okay if my grandpa and grandma are hunters and it's okay to put animals' heads all over the walls here. So I think as parents, we have to be very cautious of what we say and what we put out and what will affect our children and future generations.
And it also raises the question, where does John draw the line, for example? So he's essentially saying, I don't care whether animals are raped and murdered. That's essentially...
Because that's what's happening.
That's what's happening. You know, when other people pay others to slit throats, you know, forcibly impregnate animals, which AKA rape them, let's call it for what it is. We wouldn't say forcibly impregnate a human. We would say the human was raped, right? So let's not use euphemisms like that. Call them for what they are. So would John say those same things if they were happening to humans?
Of course not.
Of course he wouldn't.
Nobody would.
But here's the thing. The acts of rape and murder are immoral, irrespective of the victim.
Yeah.
You know, as Gary Yourofsky poses the question, I'm confused. Is rape and murder wrong, or is it just who is being raped and murdered that is wrong?
Yeah.
That determines whether it's wrong or not. Yeah. You know, and this is the speciesism.
Animals only have one life too. That's something we have to keep in mind. He says, you know, you only have one life to live, and it's by your terms. He's basically saying YOLO, you only live once. So do what you like. It's your personal choice. I don't care what you eat. I'm not going to criticize or judge you or think critically at all about who is on your plate, and you just do you. Well, animals only have one life. And for 5 minutes of sensory pleasure, we take that life from them. We take everything they have. The only thing they have is their life. And we take that. Our life goes on, but we took their life. And that's not okay. It's never been okay, and it never will be okay. And again, if it was your life that was taken and I was defending you, would you think I was being hateful and critical and judgmental and negative and that I was embarrassing? Or would you just be thanking me for saying something any way you can to speak up for them? He says, live without shame. So I guess we're interpreting that you should just not be ashamed of what you do and how you think and how you want to live, and don't let others shame you out of being who you really are. So just you do you. Where do you draw the lines, though? That's the question.
The question we have for John is, does that apply also to being sexist, racist, homophobic, or does it only apply to non-human animals?
To speciesism.
Yeah. You know, I mean, after all, isn't discrimination discrimination?
Mm. He says he feels bad for people quitting veganism and he wants to support them.
It's funny how he doesn't feel bad for the animals who will lose their lives as a result, and the impact that this has on the vegan movement, which again we're going to talk about with vegan psychologist Clare Mann after this talk between you and I.
Yeah. At the end, he says, I am embracing who I am. I'm being transparent. I'm being 100% honest. I'm kind of struggling with this because he's embracing that he doesn't care what other people do to animals and the planet. I find this concerning. I don't feel comfortable with this. I don't even know how to respond to this. I'm feeling really conflicted. How can you be 100% comfortable and honestly saying, I don't care what other people do? Or I don't have any judgment, aka critical thinking about what they do. I'm okay with people going into McDonald's. McDonald's are supporting factory farms, that they are the worst of the worst. Now, every single farm is bad, all slaughter is bad, all exploitation is wrong. And yet, McDonald's is like scraping the bottom of the barrel. You don't feel bad about people participating in that? supporting that.
It's mind-bending, perplexing, concerning.
And to tell the world I'm just being honest and this is who I am, reassess who you are. That's what I would be doing. Oof, my goodness. All right, so we're going to wind up this section.
If he's being 100% honest, but then he has to put out a video saying how he misspoke, just the two don't add up.
No, I think it was massive backpedaling with the second video. Again, we don't buy it. All right, let's wind this section up of the show. So basically, we are going to link a heap of resources. Please watch Damien and Speciesism, the movie. That is really going to help people out with understanding more about what we're talking about. And education is key, especially Speciesism, the movie. I think it's such a game changer.
Because I think when a lot of people go vegan, they might remove the carnist glasses that they were born with, where they see eating animals as normal, natural and necessary. But
they weren't born with, they were put on them. Let's just clarify that.
Yeah, because everyone's born vegan. It's only when our parents begin to indoctrinate us to eat animals and, all the institutions in our society, family, education, religion, media, corporations, government, etc. But we don't necessarily remove our speciesist glasses. So there are many vegans who remain with a speciesist mindset because that indoctrination is a bit deeper, if you like, because it extends to how we perceive animals and how we see them as here as inferior to us, as here for us, and for any purpose that we so choose.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the comments that we were reading online was that this video from John and the discussion and the things that he was saying basically gives non-vegans ammunition to use against the vegan movement. It divides the movement and it makes it harder for vegans and for activists in particular to, spread this message, because it just looks like, oh, look, someone else is, supporting meat eaters over there and kind of rubbishing a little bit of, we're judgmental. See, I agree with you. Yeah. It just creates division. It divides us. And I think it really does give ammunition to non-vegans.
It does. And we talk about this in our activism workshop. We acknowledge that there is a certain stigma attached with the word vegan and the label vegan in the minds of many not yet vegans. And yet we also realise that it is becoming more and more normalised. So we've got this sort of balancing act to manage. And the last thing we want is people within the movement siding with not yet vegans when it comes to their perspective of vegans. Yeah?
United we stand, divided we fall.
Yeah, that's about as simple as that. Yeah.
Okay, so they are our thoughts on this topic so far.
Comment furiously below what your thoughts are. We would love to read them. Let's keep that discussion flowing.
Absolutely, but stay with us because the show is not over yet. Now we're going to speak with vegan psychologist Clare Mann about the issue. We've had Clare on the show a few times, and because of her insights, they are just invaluable. We love to get her on as much as we can, and she has helped so many people through our show and through the work that she's done as well.
She has and does, and we're going to link our previous episodes with Clare in the notes below, so make sure you check those out. Clare is the author of the book Vystopia, The Anguish of Being Vegan in a Non-Vegan World. And we feel like Vystopia is actually connected to the no longer vegan and no vegan label videos that we've been discussing.
We wanted to make this response about more than just what we think. We wanted to understand the psychology behind what's happening online and how it's affecting people and the vegan community more broadly.
Hi Clare, welcome back to the show. It's a pleasure having you as always.
Thank you, and thank you for the amazing work you're doing. I've been following your show quite closely.
Oh, thank you. It's the least we can do, as we always say. Clare, could you please explain what Vystopia is for us?
Vystopia is the anguish an individual feels when they become aware of the systematized cruelty towards animals in our world and the sheer size and ubiquitous nature of it. But then it gets worse because they tell other people, thinking, well, if I can just share what I know, surely they'd become vegan right away. And then there's almost this trance-like collusion with what I call a dystopian world, a world of darkness that many of the non-vegan world aren't even aware they're part of. But then it takes another step because the vegan says, well, if I didn't know about the systematized cruelty towards animals and it was behind closed doors and my consumer choices partook of it, what else don't I know? So they start to question everything. They question government and science and education and they're very skeptical, and then they're told they're a conspiracy theorist. So the anguish comes where the person has raised the veil on the truth and they wake up one day and they feel they're truly a stranger in a strange land.
You basically wake up and you're in the movie The Matrix.
Absolutely, it is a matrix, and our job is to break that matrix by breaking the trance. And often, I think we're trance breakers. We have to do things, little sidekicks. And one example, if I might give you, is when someone says, "Oh my gosh, I love animals," just as they're sitting down to a McDonald's. And people often start to fight them, and you can't do it, and this is not possible. And so I say to people, they say, "I love animals," and they're eating a burger, or I know they eat animals. I say, "This is fantastic. I just love meeting new vegans." And they say, "What do you mean?" I say, "I'm not a vegan." "Well, how does that work?" And so they can't just go into a programmed table tennis match of I said this and you say this and it goes backwards and forwards. You've just told me I'm a vegan and you're confused. So they have to go within themselves and identify that actually they only love some animals, but it comes out of their mouth and not the vegan's mouth. So they're emotionally attached to the material they're talking about. They feel the disconnect, and we've got a little chink in the matrix.
I think we're all going to use that at our next outreach conversations.
And I was thinking I'm going to put on my bucket list to watch Claire outreach at a Cube of Truth.
Yes.
Oh, we're all doing amazing jobs.
Claire, so we've just been discussing how so many social media influencers have made videos saying they're no longer vegan or they don't want to be labelled vegan. And we'd like to look at this situation from a deeper analytical perspective and understand the psychology of why there seems to be an online vegan exodus, if you like, at the moment. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's not just veganism that people end up going back to previous behaviors. I mean, trying to change behavior. Neuroscience is telling us so much about this, of how our behaviors literally are matched by patterns in the brain, neurons firing and wiring, emotional states, hormonal states, that when somebody changes their behavior, even in something as simple as a New Year's resolution, is they start to feel uncomfortable. Their body feels different. Their associations are different and whatever. So it's not just veganism that people make a choice about something and then change it. However, of course, with veganism, because let's be clear about what it really is the philosophy of the non-use and exploitation of animals. It's an ethical stance. A lot of vegans get very upset about this. So why is this happening is the question. And I think we have to just look at the reasons people are becoming, or they call themselves vegans. And I know we've talked about this before. It seems to me we're talking about a lot of plant-based eaters or individuals that have chosen it for reasons of personal choice, as opposed to not be part of the horrific treatment of animals in our world.
I think the quote that came to mind, Claire, when you were talking about the neurons firing and how change is uncomfortable and difficult, it reminded me of Margaret Mead when she said it's easier to change a man's religion than it is to change his diet when it comes to what we eat and veganism. It is ironic, don't you think, that the movement is stronger now than it's ever been? It's easier to be vegan now than ever before. It's more mainstream. Activism is becoming more accepted and it's growing. Animal rights as a social justice movement is being recognised and discussed. So everything is on the up and up, and yet we're seeing the opposite from some social media influencers. Do you think something is shifting in the vegan movement, or are we entering a new phase that's causing this exodus perhaps?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've been following this debate quite closely, and the readers or the listeners may have watched a YouTube video by Dr. Garth Davis. It was only actually on the 1st of February. And, of course, he was associated with Forks Over Knives. And he makes it very clear a lot of these influencers, so to speak, are young people. They're youngsters. Some have eating disorders. This is his quotes directly. When we look at the real reason people become vegan, it's because they usually associated with the suffering of animals, but they look at the science, they look at the research. They don't suddenly get a spotty face and then suddenly feel my diet's inappropriate or I've been laughed at in some sort of way, I'll change. As we know, the ethical vegan is not going to change whether even if it was the worst diet on the planet, they wouldn't be part of that. So let's talk. Is the world changing, or is this sort of happening in our time? We're used to looking at social media, and that's directing our attention. But when we look at the deeper research, the reason people sort of shrink in horror and think, oh my gosh, against the backcloth of this, I believe there's an 84% recidivism rate, that's, in one sense, certain research suggests that. Joe Anderson, the director of Faunalytics, very robust, wonderful organization, 2004, said that 84% of vegans and vegetarians, they were all in the same group together, actually went back to a previous diet. So that's obviously concerned people. Then we see it on social media get concerned. However, when you look at studies, the more robust don't necessarily more robust, what's known as the EPIC Oxford study, we always find it's the other way around. That was Dr. Paul Appleby's work. He was one of the senior statisticians on that, also a member of the vegetarian research team. And he said it's the other way around, is that he studied people over many years, and instead of it being in that direction, he found that over 20 years, between the 1990s 2010, 85% of vegans and vegetarians were still following that diet. And the most up-to-date research, which is 5 years on, which is only a couple of years back, it says there's been a slight increase, but it's gone up to 27% as opposed to about 15%. So yes, it might be on the increase, but it's very low. And the core group of people are not going to change. So they're going to be the people related to the ethics, I would imagine.
That's really good to hear. Thank you for giving us those numbers. What we've noticed is how many messages we have received from, honestly, countless people around the world saying they're very confused about this. They're expressing their shock and their dismay and their sadness and anger and frustration. These are their words. There's a lot of mixed emotions that we're getting in messages from people. And we'd like to help them work through this. How does this relate to Vystopia?
Of course. Well, number one, let's take Vystopia as we know what it is. But that third stage, when I talk about, well, if you didn't know about what's happening to animals here, what else don't we know? And when we look at films like What the Health and things, we realize that there are higher powers that are corrupt. There are sponsors often behind getting people to say things for large sums of money or for kudos or recognition. And some people, their ethics are such that they will go along with that. So there are some people, particularly celebrities, I have no evidence of it, but if it's standard what happens in any other industry, I would say there are some people there that literally have been bought off and are capable of doing that. So you haven't got this ethical person who's prepared not to be bought at any price related to their veganism. You've got some people that perhaps for all sorts of reasons have come on the bandwagon, maybe adopted that diet, they have environmental concerns, yes. But the person that becomes vegan related to animal suffering, that experience is so visceral to them, they cannot, their body, will be rejecting any attempt to be part of that system. So for those people is firstly, realize that people are quite fallible. In all walks of life, people let us down. We often look up to people and then we find there's been a misdemeanor somewhere and we can be heartbroken. For some reason we like gurus. We've got to find that guru within ourselves. I think it's realizing that the more light we shine on things, the darkness shows even more. So there are stories coming out of the woodwork, so to speak, often engineered by people that they don't like the growth of veganism, so that they will, promulgate those sort of stories, exacerbate that. The media is deeply controlled by these industries who pay for huge amounts of advertising. So firstly, let's reframe it in the sense of you haven't got all these people suddenly ethical vegans and then they suddenly wake up and decide to do something different. So let's just sort of reframe that in some sort of sense. We're the ones we've been waiting for. If you're an individual who's deeply distressed by that, ask yourself, why am I distressed by it? And it's usually because how is this possible when someone becomes aware of this? What sort of monsters am I having to deal with, even in the vegan community? And that's not always the case. It's, people that truly have, connected with the suffering of animals and also therefore the concern of people and environment. They're the normal people. They get hurt by being let down and the movement not moving as quickly. So surround yourself with some really good people. Talk about the things that matter with people. Look for strategies to manage your self-care and also encourage other people that where there is light, the darkness shows too, and some people will be bored, I think.
I think for many people who don't have vegan family or even vegan friends in their lives, I think they turn to social media and kind of build their online vegan community or vegan family, if you like. And so I think when the people they look up to, or some of whom have even turned them vegan, go back to eating animals, I think that not being able to cope with that is kind of a bit very challenging, very taxing, very soul-destroying in a way, because that's like a member of your family. Even though you haven't actually met that person, you might go home every night and look at their posts or watch their videos, and they become part of your understanding of veganism and part of your identity in a way. So, yeah, I kind of feel like their internal experience of veganism crumbles a little bit, I think is what I'm trying to say, when they see these people they look up to leave the movement.
I think you're absolutely right. And the notion of family is very important, because a lot of people find what they call their real family, and they feel more at home with their other activist friends and whatever. But let's just use the analogy of the family for a moment. Most children, whether they're treated well or not well, they look up to their parents. You get children that are beaten by their parents and they still see them as heroes, or they don't want to believe the worst of them, or there's a reason why this happened. Very hard for us to imagine that people who should love us, who ostensibly do love us, are able to treat us badly. So they're extremes, of course, but when we look up to members of our family or look to them to do the right thing, and then we find they did something bad, their ethics, so they did something bad at work, or they treated people badly. Often, grown children of farmers, for instance, they really cannot encompass for a moment there could be any suffering there. It's hard to imagine their parents would do that. So it's hard for us, and that's part of our maturity, is realizing the fallibility of other people, particularly the ones we've looked up to. And I think I can only just imagine the distress of these poor individuals, in the same way that infighting happens between vegans, and we say, surely we're on the same side. It's bad enough trying to have to deal with the carnists out there. Why should we be, fighting amongst ourselves? Human beings have all the normal problems of life: money, work, self-image, concerns, existential anxieties. What's it all about? And then we throw Vystopia on the top. So it's a real cocktail for emotion. So for those people don't see this as the standard thing. There is not. All the research shows us. Because I think those earlier studies by Phonalytics, they weren't flawed in any way, but when you mix vegetarians with vegans, it's a completely different, a vegetarian, of course, is still eating the reproductive secretions of other animals. And so to band them in together with a very key stance on animal social justice, it's hardly surprising there's some recidivism if the person suddenly gets a health issue. Although it would be unjustified, it's probably the type of diet they're doing. So surround yourself with good people. If you haven't got access outside your family, look to other groups that you find supportive. As hard as it is, find the guru within yourself, find the champion within yourself, so that you become a thought leader, so that you help others. The animals need us to be strong, and we've got a huge job. And when you're on your own, it's very difficult, but you're in incredibly good company around the world.
That's great advice, Claire. In Vystopia, you discuss truly fascinating concepts, things such as the tipping point, collective unconscious, entrainment, and spiral dynamics, just to name a few. And I highly recommend that all of our listeners check out the book Vystopia, because it is a fascinating read. I just want to say, regarding the tipping point, you talk about innovators, early adopters, and the early and late majority. Now, I can't help but think, with all of these Why I'm No Longer Vegan videos, that some of the perceived early adopters of veganism have rejoined the early or late majority. Do you think this is a normal part of reaching the tipping point? Do you think this will slow or accelerate the tipping point, or not even affect it at all?
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Because perhaps a better definition of innovator would, it's a real trailblazer, so to speak. So whilst they adopted, i.e. they changed their diet, were they vegans in the first place is a question. I always, whenever I'm on a show or anything and someone says, I used to be vegan and now I'm not. And I said, is that actually a thing? Because, you actually were never vegan. And that's not to be anyway precious or superior, but it's actually, for me, it's actually an existential impossibility for someone to become vegan and not be vegan. It's not impossible for someone to be moved by suffering of others and environments and then actually change their diet and go back. But I don't think it's possible for someone who has that non-speciesist view of the world. They wouldn't suddenly eat their children if they were hungry, or they got suddenly if they were told that was the best diet. So why would they, go and eat an animal? So, but no, I think to sort of clarify to anyone listening who doesn't know about tipping points, it seems to be that in all sort of social trends, adoption of use of the internet, of becoming vegan, of adoption of mobile phones. In fact, marketers use this all the time. There seem to be those innovators, the people that, well before other people come on board, they jump on board and actually they lead the way. Now, maybe those young celebrities are not actually the innovators; they're the early adopters. So the innovator right at the beginning of the people 40 years ago became vegan when the word wasn't even known, and they're laughed at, and there's no context for them. But we're seeing people move into that, and it's a very small percentage. Just trying to imagine my statistics, which I haven't got to hand here. They'll come back to me. In many ways, they turn into what we call the laggards in terms of those people that adopt the plant-based diet and do it later on. Perhaps we should separate plant-based diets and veganism. Perhaps they're two different normal distribution curves, I would say. It just seems to be that when we reach a critical 16%, which is our early innovators and early adopters, when everyone's laughing at them and saying, gosh, it'll never take off, it suddenly flips into about another 34% of early majority, then a late majority. And that's why we're seeing this massive increase. And the Economist magazine, that business magazine, saying 2019 is poised to be the year of the vegan, because business is coming on board. Vegan magnums are coming on board. And, are all these businesses vegan in the ethical sense? No, they're not. Does the effect be the same, the net effect on the animals? Yes. But there is going to be a potential for people to revert when it no longer supports them. The more we bring people into these increasing numbers who are ethically based and have a real concern for animals, people, and planet, then consciousness raises, I believe, and then consciousness of everyone raises, and those people aren't going to go back.
So basically, these social media people are not affecting the tipping point.
I don't think so, not at all. I think, people are going to get disturbed by that. But no, I think not at all. That would be my opinion. But, statistically as well, we've got people are coming into this. For some, it's trendy. For some, it's the right thing to do. People like conforming. We're just creating a new norm. But in terms of the spiral dynamics you mentioned, that really talks about different levels of consciousness in society and the different languages we need to speak to people. Many people do it for their own self-aggrandizement and their ego, and for other people, it's it's trendy to do it. For others, it's conformity, should do it, must do it, and for others, it's just holding the possibility of a much better future and going against the norm. And we need to speak different languages to those people to usher them into the increasing move towards a higher level of consciousness.
That kind of feeds a little bit into my next question, Claire. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke about negative peace being the absence of tension and positive peace being the presence of justice. Can you share with us any examples of what apologetic vegans, as they're sometimes referred to as, have said or done in an attempt to keep negative peace with not yet vegan family members, friends or colleagues? Is keeping the negative peace healthy psychologically? And what tips can you offer vegans in this situation?
Right. So when you're saying negative peace, you mean people that don't upset the apple cart, they don't want to call themselves vegan. It's up to people what they do. You mean that?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So could you just repeat the end of the last bit of the question? Sorry.
Yes, certainly. It was a mouthful. It was a multi-part. My apologies.
Yeah.
So can you share with us any examples of what apologetic vegans, as they're sometimes referred to as, have said or done in an attempt to keep that negative peace with not yet vegan family members, friends or colleagues? Is keeping that negative peace healthy psychologically? And any tips that you can offer to vegans who might find themselves in that situation?
Sure. I saw a quote the other day, and I don't think it was Martin Luther King Jr. or another, but something like it. When it was something about, when we fear conflict of what we say, we avoid the conflict on the outside and we start an enormous war on the inside. You know, and to quote him again, or related to him, you know, he said something, and I paraphrase, is, you know, when we do something that is wrong, you know, it leaves an indelible mark on our soul. And so, however, let's not shame people. You know, people are struggling. They're in families that, you know, everyone's against them, and they're, you know, they may be young. They may not have the independence to move away and be, or in areas of the world where there's nobody around them. It can be very hard. You know, people have different capacities to deal with being ridiculed and laughed at, and so. But I think when people come out and say, "Oh, it's up to people what they do," you know, people should have choice. Well, people have a choice to go and bash people up, but you know, it doesn't mean it's acceptable and it's okay. There are consequences for that. And as we know, yes, it is your choice whether you want to eat animals and the reproductive secretions of other animals. But the reality is there's a victim here, and there's a sufferer, and there's a consequence. And actually, it's not you here, yes, in your health, but there are other people to take into account. So I really don't. I think it's dangerous to be using that language. It's up to you. It's your choice. You know, I think if we do it in a more existential way, yes, we all have choice. We can choose not to choose and not do anything. We can choose to bash people up or not bash people up, and there are consequences. When we choose to not speak our truth, I think we are in training. We are resonating with an energy that sort of goes with the status quo. And I think there's a bigger internal cost for that. I think as hard as it is, as we know, everyone who's become vegan in an ethical sense, the first thing they say is, I wish I knew what I knew years ago. I would have been vegan before. You know, do we want to be responsible for people saying, why did you put up with that? Why didn't you challenge me? Why did you say, actually, your choice isn't okay? You have a right to do it, but actually, I'm not okay with it because animals are suffering as a result. Now that you know what you know and you say, well, I'm okay with that. I'm not okay. It doesn't sit well with me. Yes, you can do it, but actually it's not okay. And I'm going to leave that to your conscience and your thing. But I will always speak up for these animals. You know, I think separating also the crime from the criminal, so to speak. You know, we can absolutely abhor the behavior of colluding with a system of atrocity, and yet also try to be generous with people on their journey of coming into this full awareness when the veil is totally lifted, where there's no way they would be part of the system.
Such great words. Thank you so much, Claire. I feel like it clarifies the situation that many people who engage with social media influencers are finding themselves in and thinking and trying to just get their head around and their heart around what's happening and how do we all deal with this. And, you know, my vegan world as it is, which lives on that screen, is dying in many ways, and I just want to find my sense of it all and my place in the world, and, you know, what do I do about it? So I feel like you've given some light that can definitely help people. Is there anything else that you want to share with us before we say goodbye?
Yes. You know, we're brought up in our school system, we're looking at Newtonian physics sort of thing and science, that, you know, anything that has been like the law of attraction or energy fields and whatever, it's a bit the domain of New Age and whatever. Anyone who's ever had any of those practices, you know, which is called New Age, you know, often benefit enormously in energy healing, and I'm certainly one of them. And what is now we're finding is that what was the domain of New Age or the law of attraction, or a bit fluffy sort of thing, quantum science, which has been around 200 years labeled as a thing, is suddenly catching up with these things. And what we're finding is that in scientific research, what we thought, human thought, is able to affect physical matter. And I'm not talking correlations. We think more positive things, we get more positive things. That is the fact. But when we set it under experimental conditions, where people are aligned in their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions, and they're thinking, for instance, in things like the Peaceful Cities projects, where people are specifically thinking about a particular city and peace and reducing it results experimentally in cause and effect experiments where there is a reduction in crime, in physical abuse of other people, lots of other negative things in that society. When they take away people concentrating and focusing on peace there, these things go up again. And they do this under experimental conditions. So therefore, be careful about what you think. If we think, oh my God, my vegan world's disappearing, oh my gosh, the world is not becoming vegan, we are giving energy to that other affecting matter. When we be around great people like that vegan couple, we bring people in around the world, we look at science, we look at common sense, we look at this world in training to a better way. We are being part of affecting matter. That's why we're seeing what we call the collective unconscious, people rushing into that. So as hard as it is, we're the ones we've been called to do this. And, the more you resonate on that positive side, you're going to influence other people so that the other people they'll be the laggards. They'll be a little bit, okay, well, I'll go back to a vegan diet.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you don't feel empowered after that, folks, I don't know what's going to...
Yeah, I was thinking Buddha said it 2,500 years ago, what we think we become.
Yeah.
And that's definitely what you were getting at there, Claire. And for us to keep our eyes on the bigger picture and to keep moving forward.
And to keep perspective.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us and our audience, Claire. We always appreciate it. I know our audience does too. Thank you so much for your time, because we know you're a very busy person helping animals, people, and the planet. Thank you, Claire.
We'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Hope you've enjoyed this episode. Now we'd like to hear from you. Leave your thoughts and comments below.
We'll link some references below as well to help people educate themselves further, and we'll also link some references for vegan psychologist Clare Mann that you will find extremely helpful.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more of our podcast show, we have 25 free episodes on our website, thatvegancouple.com/podcasts. And the rest of our episodes are available on Patreon for just $1 a month, which gives you access to all of our episodes. We'll link everything below.
If you think other people would benefit from our show, let them know about it by sharing our podcast page from our website on your social media.
You can also help us out by leaving a rating and review on iTunes.
That's all for today. Thanks again for listening, and we'll speak to you soon in the next episode.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to That Vegan Couples podcast at www.thatvegancouple.com.